Good morning, Simone.
Morning.
Hi guys, this is Charli Wall. I am here live streaming with my very wonderful client Simone for my podcast Courage Dear Heart, and we're live streaming in my free Facebook group, Wild Awakening, Understanding Your Feminine Nature. So another warm welcome to you, Simone.
Thank you.
How are you feeling?
I'm good. I just said to you a minute ago, just feel like I need to do a bit of a shake.
Yes, I like a good shake with Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
So the purpose of this interview, I always do my podcast episodes live in my free Facebook group. I often interview clients of mine, and so you have agreed to be interviewed finally for this podcast. And I always start with a question because the podcast is called Courage, Dear Heart. What does the word courage mean for you?
So for me, universally, it will always mean feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And I can see that everywhere. And I would say that to other people, just do it, even scared. But on a more personal level, when I feel the most courageous is when I make a decision and hold the tension of that decision, which I've learned from working with you. And yeah, so personally, that's what it really means in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, so it takes courage for you to sit and hold the tension in any decision.
Yes, because I never would have before.
Yeah, so can we circle back to that? Because I think that's a really interesting point that potentially will help a lot of people understand what that means, holding the tension. But before we get into that, I'd love for you to share, like, obviously I've had the privilege of knowing you since China was teeny tiny. So I have known you for a very long time, which I feel very blessed to have done and to have you in my community. But like before you started coaching with me, what were you experiencing in your life? What was life like for you?
I was incredibly anxious, but I didn't know I was anxious. I knew anxiety existed, but I was so horrible to myself that almost for me to see that I had anxiety would be a pass. So it wasn't that I was anxious, it was that I was just a horrible person. And that led into my parenting. Um, and yeah, just I was just horrible to myself every day, not feeling good enough, and yeah, anxious and not very nice to myself every
So,
day.
yeah, so not being very nice to yourself, feeling anxious, although you didn't know you were anxious at the time, me either. Before I started doing this work, I had no idea how anxious I was. So, how would that, apart from being horrible to yourself, if you can remember back to those times, so I know it's difficult, but like, what was life like? How would that have manifested for you in your day-to-day life?
So anytime Jordan, my partner, would leave, we were fine if we were all together as a family. So I've got 7 children. Um, but if he would go somewhere for the day, I would become completely paralyzed and go into this wallowing rather than just parenting my children and getting on with the day. I would feel completely useless and like I couldn't do it alone.
Yeah, so what would that mean then for you? Like when he would go away? I remember the football days.
Yeah, I just be horrible to myself and I'd be diving into my phone trying to escape what I was feeling and felt like I was a completely useless mother, and it was just vile. Yeah, just felt completely, I couldn't see the day for what it was. I just felt like the day was doomed and that was it. We just had to ride it out and everyone had to basically fend for themselves. And when I fed my children, but I was so consumed with what a horrible mother and how useless I was, that I couldn't really give them anything other than the basics.
So there was one kind of overwhelming, overriding, dominant thought that you used to have. Can you remember what it was?
That everyone's better off without me.
Yeah. And why did that seem real for you at the time?
Why did that feel real? Because I just felt like I was a burden to everybody. And when I wasn't this jolly, upbeat mum, I was going to drag everyone down with me in my wallowing. And it felt like Jordan was almost like my carer. And this wasn't all the time, but when it came heavy. I couldn't do it. Not that I couldn't do it without him, but just everyone would be better and their life would be lighter and nicer if this burden that is me wasn't dragging them all down.
Which is heavy, right?
Yeah.
And did you have any relationship with your cycle at the time?
No, not greatly.
Okay, so we embarked on 1-to-1 and you came into my circle. Can you remember the first thing that started to shift?
The first thing really for me was when you said, because there was a lot of me arguing with you about how crap I am as a person, but when you said to me, just consider that what I'm telling you is true, that I might just be a good person through and through, I just don't know it, that I am good enough. And then I kind of relaxed and was kind of more curious of, oh yeah, I suppose I could consider that it's true. I'm not going to believe it right now, but I could consider it. And then yeah, everything else kind of from there got easier, I suppose, because I started listening rather than then arguing with you.
Yeah, well, everyone argues with me. They fight me for their limitations, which is interesting, isn't it? Really, when somebody sort of invests in themselves financially, in time, in energy, and then they spend a lot of the time arguing for the whole reason they want to change in the first place, sort of fighting for those beliefs. So that was the first sort of crack that started to show for you, yeah? That
Yeah,
you considered that it might be possible that you're a good person.
yeah.
And then
Me up.
say again.
It just kind of shut me up, and then I just sat back.
Yeah. So at what point did you realize that you had anxiety?
What point did I realize it was anxiety? I think it was when I learned about the thoughts coming in and how frequently they came in. And then I kind of stopped taking my thoughts so personally and just saw them as anxiety thoughts rather than my thoughts.
Yeah. So moving through you. And what impact did that have?
It was more of a practice of not taking them seriously. So they would come in and they'd hook me sometimes, but the more I practiced that these thoughts may not be true, then they just stopped coming. And when they did come, they were just like a little breeze rather than a hurricane coming through.
Yeah.
Before working with you, or even I think maybe at the very beginning, I'd be, how do I stop them? And obviously, the more you're trying to stop them, the harder they're going to come because you're giving them all your attention.
Yes,
Whereas,
it's like, yeah, the egoic metaphorical finger trap. The more you try to get that finger out, the more you try to figure out like how to stop it, you're adding more energy onto the thought. So yeah, the 3 pillars that I tend to work with people, which you've been a part of as I've also learnt this for myself, are the principles, so the inside out nature of life, the nervous system, and the energetics. Those are the three main pillars that I use. Are you able to sort of share your experience of like coming on that journey with me as I've learnt those pieces for myself? Like what's happened for you? What's opened up for you?
Yeah, so like I said, just learning that I am not my thoughts with the principles, and I still can't explain the principles.
That's okay. Like, don't worry about it.
But I know that I live it every day.
It's very difficult to articulate something that's formless, that's true, you know, because this isn't like, here are your 5 steps. That's why people argue, right? Because they want the 5 steps, but they've done the 5 steps and the 5 steps haven't worked. So don't worry, don't make that a thing like.
No, I don't. And I've tried, and it's just, maybe it's just something that's just not ever going to come. But also that life is going to keep doing the process of the 3 principles, whether I'm involved in it or not. Kind of this creation, it's me who decides what I want to take seriously and what I don't. Yeah. It's just going through those motions. And then the nervous system, again, was hugely impactful for me, because I suddenly realized that my whole life I had been in fight or flight. And then again, I kind of stopped being so hard on myself for something. I need to change, I need to do this. Instead, what I needed to do was really love and care for myself to get myself out of that fight or flight lifestyle, I suppose, because it has been consistent from childhood up to adulthood. So it was then I kind of needed to take charge and really reparent myself. And when I make wrong decisions, instead of beating myself up, what I really need is to love and nurture myself in those moments. And then moving on from the nervous system, the energetics completely blew my mind, because it almost made life feel like a game. And with making decisions and holding the tension when you make decisions, instead of collapsing and then going back to the beginning, almost like snakes and ladders. If you hold the tension in this decision, you're going to potentially go up. But if you collapse, you're just going back into the same loop. Yeah.
Yeah, the old looping.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about the tension then, because I think you've probably, because you're very big, you know, and active on Instagram. So you have a lot of followers on Instagram, and you've just started to dip your toe into sort of joining your Facebook with your Instagram, which took you towards the tension, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what's been, like, maybe we can sort of explain that a little bit to whomever's listening, but like, how has that piece transformed your life?
The linking the Facebook to the Instagram.
Holding the tension when making a decision. Like, because you could talk about that as an example, right? Because you had a lot of matter in it, right?
Yeah. So before, I had this, I call her Simone Rosalie UK on Instagram. And she was this wonderful show woman and did all the things. She was brilliant, even though I didn't feel that always on the inside. I could create this shiny, glistening person. And then on Facebook was this real life, and kind of linked into the real people that I see. Anyway, I accidentally linked them. And initially, I was going to cut and run and work out how to unlink them. But I just was curious as to what would happen if I held that tension and crossed all borders as the same person. And yeah, again, it was transformational, because what would happen was I'd see people in real life and it felt like I had this secret other person on the other side who was cringy or was too much for people or whatever else. But it just made me reveal myself I could show up anywhere as the same person, basically. And I had to trust that I was that same person who was great and glistening and who also picks up dog poo in the garden. It was kind of, yeah, hard to explain.
Well, so we've talked about the masks that people wear, right? And how we have a certain mask that we hide behind so that people don't see what we perceive to be as the real us. So for you, using that one example, which I'm sure potentially many people might resonate with, particularly if they are like out there coaching or sharing little businesses or like whatever they may be doing. What was it like for you to uncover that mask?
It was, so I've always been very honest on Instagram, so I could perceive her as this great mother, but then I'd also share the lows, but they felt like polar opposite. Whereas sharing it on all platforms, to my neighbours, to family members, to everyone, it kind of allowed me to also be the person in between that could be all on all ends of the spectrum, rather than just either really great or really, really bad.
But what did it take in you and your system to be able to do that and bear all to all?
It was the trust of holding the tension and trusting that whatever, there is no right or wrong decision, and whatever life wants to show me, I'm just following the breadcrumbs, always following the breadcrumbs. This has been linked for a reason, and I can drop back down the snake and collapse, or continue with holding the tension and moving forward.
I love that snake and ladder analogy. Yeah, we might have to call this episode Snakes and Ladders. The snake is a little fucker.
Yeah. And it's funny, you always said about the magic that happens in the tension. And there was a time I had I can't remember what it was, a mild argument with Jordan. And usually I'd probably not send him some abuse, but kind of say something after he'd gone to work, kind of say something to try and get something from him. Anyway, I'd left it. And that, for me, that was holding the tension. And
Yes.
what happened was he responded a couple of hours later with this apology, but not like a wimpy apology, just, I'm sorry that happened this morning, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember what it was about. And I was like, oh, there's the magic. There's the magic in the waiting. It's the energy that we lead from.
Yes.
And then
that gives me goosebumps.
Yeah. And then I became more curious, where else and I'm kind of a bit like a tension addict now. Kind of, where else can I hold the tension and wait what life does for me, instead of me trying to control everything?
Yeah, which happens when people are anxious, and this is unconscious. They're trying to control and stay in the known, thinking that if they're in control, it's going to be okay. But ultimately, it leads to our very difficult, uncomfortable, anxiety-provoking, habit-forming, familial cycle.
Which is exhausting.
Mate, totally exhausting. I spent a lot longer doing it. Yes, it's exhausting. And I'm sure a lot of people will resonate with that. And I think you've articulated that beautifully. And also, just to say, you did articulate the principles beautifully, because it's about thought, right? And not taking notice of it, and not, most people don't realize that it's just neutral and it's moving through. You did that beautifully. And I think you speak about this tension really well, because it's the no, the feminine no, and actually the habit, the conditioning of wanting to be in control of a response from Jordan and not sitting in the state of stillness, which is what we do, and emanate from there, the frequency. He came to you to provide what you needed in that moment. And absolutely, I think that you went on to Facebook linked by divine intervention, not accident at all.
No, because that was it. I couldn't hide anymore. And even though nobody knew this other life I had, I would go into these situations almost like paranoid, like, I wonder if they know about that thing I said. Or because I was very honest on my Instagram, I kind of just felt self-conscious all the time. Whereas I just had to bear myself here, like, yeah, I said that thing. Yes, that is what I do. Yes, I do get up at 2 a.m. and all this stuff. It was just kind of, I had to expose myself, and it was freeing rather
Yeah.
than trying to hide round corners and in crevices. And they might not think that, they might have seen that thing of me, but I'm really shy, and they might get the wrong idea. Or I just had to lay myself bare to the world, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. What happens when we tell ourselves we're shy?
We get quiet.
Yeah, that becomes our reality. We
Mm.
birth what we believe. So what's opening up for you now? Now that you've kind of like, you've gone through this process with me, you trust yourself implicitly, you trust life, you trust the tension. What's happening for you now?
So life has become about coaching my children and sharing my knowledge with them. And I feel like that's really my mission here, is to share, because this information and this knowing and all of these things, there's so much more I've learned than what we can possibly squeeze into this tiny episode. But sharing all this knowledge and knowing and peace, just life is so peaceful with my children. And to think 7 children will go out into the world with this knowledge, even if they know nothing else, but to know that they have it all and they are capable and they're perfect just as they are. And even if they make wrong decisions, it's just everything's exactly as it's supposed to be. And I really feel like all of my energy going into them and parenting them in a way that they deserve, in a way that everyone deserves, is really my get up and go every single day.
Yeah, so you now homeschool the children, don't you, where you didn't before? So
No.
tell me about that.
So my 2 oldest, who are 14 and 11, they wanted to stay in school. So I respect that for them. But my 5 youngest came out of school, and we just live every day like nothing else matters, just us in our little bubble and just learning in a really peaceful way. And kind of we just silence everything else, and they live these wonderful experiences, and we go do amazing things. And it is really me just living my dream. I've wanted to homeschool my children since my 11-year-old was 3, but I just didn't trust myself at all. And everyone else's voices were so loud that it was this knowing in me, but I thought, I couldn't possibly. But then when I learned to trust myself and trust my decisions and know that not everything is permanent, and I can change my mind, and I can do it for a little while and they can go back, or we can do it for a long time. And even if I completely fail them in whatever way that means, they have their own wisdom, and I'll do my bit. And whether they grow up and think it's right or wrong, that's exactly as it's supposed to be. And they will use their own wisdom following on from however I parent them.
Mm. So you're a channel for them.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound like you think everyone would be better off without you anymore.
No.
Thank God.
No, it would be terrible. It would be terrible. And I just, yeah, and also I'm parenting myself on the same level as I parent them, and I'm really an important part of this family. We spoke about our inner child probably many times, but there was one time and I just imagined I've pulled her out and sat her with my children. So now when we make decisions about our day to day, I'm always asking her as well, what do you need, all the time? And just we're all equal and well loved now. And I would be devastated if one of my children felt like people were better off without them. So now I don't even entertain that within myself.
Which must have opened up a huge amount of space, because if you're busy filling your metaphorical space with bullshit, lies, stories, there's space, right?
Yeah.
What's opened up for you?
Just nudges come in now. So we've recently completely scrapped screen time. We don't have phones in the house, we don't have TVs, and we then are just following that, and we're just waiting for nudges to come in. Like I don't even really have to make decisions about what's happening in 5 years or what's happening in 10 years. I'm just waiting, whether that's a day to day, hour by hour. We're just following the breadcrumbs.
I love that, because when my son was younger, I lived in an anxious state, as I said, I didn't realize. And my day would be hour by hour by hour and completely around the school, sort of 9 to 3, whatever it was back then. And I was incredibly anxious and would plan in meticulous detail the holidays. So
Yeah.
what I'm hearing you say is what's opened up is you don't need to plan. You have the space for intuitive nudges from you and the children. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is incredible, Simone.
Yeah. The difference. And just to completely, yeah, I'm just always looking as well now, how can I make more space? Like I said, with the screen time, that was taking up for me personally 6 hours a day. Now I've taken that out, it's even more space to we do things like daydream and watch clouds go by and sit and read books. And this is all the things that I visualized as an amazing mother, but before I didn't have the space for it. And now I'm thinking, oh, how can I make more space? Well, it's saying no to that. We were supposed to go on a home ed experience at the zoo yesterday, but we woke up on the day and that was just a no. So instead we stayed home and we played and we read, and it's just everything just feels more peaceful when you allow that space. And at the beginning you have to be quite forceful with your no, but it's so much better. You're knowing of, like with the screens, that like with the home education, that was a knowing in me, but I felt like I needed it. Whereas it was just a decision on the morning, this is a no now, let's change that. And yeah, the space, the peace, oh, it's just wonderful. Complete transformation to me 3-4 years ago.
And you now have a relationship with your cycle.
Yes.
Has that made a difference for you?
Yes, because again, I don't take any thoughts I have really seriously around my period. And also I can plan my month around my energy levels and not overcommit to things when I'm probably not going to be feeling at my greatest. And then it just stops that loop of beating myself up and forcing myself to do things, which then creates more burnout. And also I was often described as manic, when I would be super great and happy and then would have this drop. Well, I now just see that as my femininity, and I'm not manic. I'm in those times, that's great and should be celebrated in that summer of my cycle. And then when the winter comes, I'm not 100%. I will promote the winters and how important they are for rest, but that journey within itself, that yes, this is actually vital for me to retreat and rest if I need to, and cry if I need to. It doesn't mean that I'm a horrible person that should be doing better or that needs fixing.
No, because we're all learning, and you have to be very gentle and forgive yourself over and over and over again. That's part of it, isn't it? That's part of attuning to your needs.
Yeah, and before I was constantly wanting to be that manic, that was described version of myself all the time, where I've just had to let that go now, because that's not even sustainable.
No. Well, it's another mask. It's another way, like there's a sort of conditioning in society that I'm really busy. How are you? Busy. How are you? Tired. Busy and tired.
Yeah.
I'm busy. Really? Are you busy? Busy.
Also, the promotion of be the best version of you. Like, I think that's gone a bit toxic now, because you already are.
Yes,
Exactly.
you already are. Absolutely. Always. 100%. Never any question about that. And that marketing is directed specifically at women because they know they don't feel good enough most of the time. And there's that messages, this sort of insidious underlying messages. You could be a better version of yourself.
Yeah, you could be better. Yeah.
You can't be a better version of yourself. I definitely feel like I have grown and evolved and understand myself and have gentleness and tenderness and unconditional love. So I guess in that sense, I'm a changed woman, but I'm no better than I was 10 years ago. I'm just now responding from adult rather than wounded, pained, sad identification with that part of me. But there's no better or worse. So, young Simone.
Got a flashback to my birthday, of me crying on my birthday then when you said about me. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, but I wasn't sure because I know you put it out there. You put it out on your socials that
Yeah.
you kind of struggled on your birthday and then it was gone. What do you think that was, and why do you think it moved so quickly?
I don't know. I think what I think it is the passing on the responsibility of your happiness to other people. When I visualize it's someone's birthday, straight away I see masses of balloons and here's your ticket to your spa day and this wonderful celebration and post-it notes of why you're so great all around the house. Well, I personally wouldn't even want that, but it's still society gets in through the cracks, and I think that's possibly a part of it, that every day that I live my life feels like my birthday. Like, I do what I want when I want. If there's something I don't like, I don't do it. Whereas on that day, it suddenly feels like I'm meant to be a spectator and there's this fanfare coming, but the fanfare never comes. So I think maybe I felt a bit icky then, but it's been the same for years. But I'm sure there's much more of a reason, but I don't know. And I wish I did, because with most things I can work out why. But also on Sunday, I just said to everyone, I just don't really like my birthday. So we're just going to ride it out and then I'll feel better. And I did. It passed. It was just the morning, really. And then our day just carried on like a normal Sunday and it felt good again. But before, I would have really been like, see, that person, there's no presence at the door, there's no this, and it would have been, oh, I'm such a horrible person, that's why there's not this big shenanigan about my birthday. Whereas I just tried my best not to take those thoughts seriously, even though they came, and I just knew that it was a case of just riding it out, and I did, and it was fine. Whereas before, it probably would have carried on for days because there was evidence of why I'm a crap person and nobody likes me.
Which seems so far removed from the actual truth, but it's so interesting how it hooks us in. Because what we're not saying here, and I know you don't ever say this, what we're not saying here to anyone who's listening, who's kind of has listened to you before, is that life is going to be like Mary Poppins every day. It is that you ride the waves of all of it with more understanding, more attunement, more compassion, more love, and more less relating to the pain body, less relating to that sort of story, like you're saying it was that, you know, you're a burden and everyone would be better off without you, and that's why you wouldn't get any presents. Every single thing that was happening for you was a reference and an evidence of your theory. So yes, those thoughts do come in, right? They still potentially can hook you in, possibly more so when you're on a bleed. I don't bleed anymore, but I can still get my own version of this. But you allow it, you be with it, you get curious about it, you open your heart to it. It's not about numbing and running and, you know, all the things that we do to fill the void. Sometimes these are old feelings that need to be felt and acknowledged and not abandoned.
No, and just as if our children were feeling sad for whatever reason on that day, we wouldn't hurl abuse at them. We'd say, oh, I'm really sorry you're feeling like that. Here, have a hug. Do you want a cup of tea? But we don't do that always for ourselves.
No.
That their emotions will pass, but we don't know that for ourselves. So we hammer in, and of course you're going to feel worse.
Yeah. And the feminine loves to feel.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to anyone who is thinking about like either embarking with you or me? Like, what would you say to anyone who was like considering taking a step forwards into changing their lives?
I would say that your life will change. You don't even know how it will change. It's a whole other life that you wouldn't even think possible, because it's not only feeling better, it's knowing and learning for yourself why these things happen, and it's not your fault. And I would just say, make it happen in any way you can, because it is transformational how you can see life so differently and live a peaceful life. It is possible to live a peaceful life.
It is. Well, you and I are both testament to that. And we've worked hard, right? It's not like a quick fix. We've worked hard to do it. I'm just going to check the Facebook group quickly whilst you're here to see if anyone said anything to you. It might be that they didn't. But we're not going to make that. We're not going to make that mean anything.
All as it's supposed to be.
I can't even see it. Am I live in there? Oh, God.
Hope so.
What a laugh that would be. We've done this all.
Let's say live at the top of my.
It does say live on mine as well. I can't see it, but anyway, as everything, what will be will be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see it in there. Oh gosh, Simone.
It now doesn't say live. Oh no, it does.
Can
That's
you check? Did
back.
you? Pardon?
I'll come back again. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's not there. I can't see it. Anyway, I'm recording it. So if worst comes to the worst, I'll just upload it. But thank you. Thank
No,
you for
yeah,
coming. And yeah, you have been such a joy to work with. You know, like I really value you as a member of my community and, you know, as a beautiful human being in your own right. I think you share amazing stuff and I love your energy and I love you.
thank you. And the same to you. And I just want to say it doesn't end with me. Like all the work that you have passed on to me, it ripples out to my children and they share, you know, in their own innocent ways, their knowledge to other people. And I just really appreciate the work that you've done for yourself in order for it to happen for me and to happen for my children and whoever else is blessed to come into our presence. But yeah, it's not just about working on yourself. That's great, but also the impact that it has on the world. And if everyone knew this stuff, the world would just be an incredible place.
Well, once a woman truly understands the truth of her feminine nature, it changes the relationships. People change around her. If her frequency really does go first, it changes. So my community, my field has changed. You're testament to that. Your field has changed because I've heard people, well, they've written as they've come into the group, you know, it's impacted your work's impacted them hugely. So without even knowing it, yes, it changes the field and it changes other females. So thank you as well. Thank you for trusting me.
Thank you. And the same, of course.
Stay there because I'm going to just shut it down. But ladies, if you are watching this, because for some reason we can't see it in the group, please leave us a comment and let us know you watched it, whether you're watching it now or you watch it later. Let us know what you think. And for anyone who's listening on the podcast, please feel free to share this episode with anyone you think might be interested and or leave me a review. That would be super helpful because it helps other people find me. But for now, thank you so much, Simone. As always, you are a joy. I appreciate you and I will see you guys all very soon. Lots of love.